All right, well, good morning, you guys. We are going to continue our series in Ecclesiastes this morning. I preached a few weeks ago to introduce the series, and then we had our Mission Sunday, and then Eugene taught last Sunday on the first part of Ecclesiastes 2, and I'm going to continue that. And I told you that at that time that I was really excited for this series in Ecclesiastes. And that's kind of weird because Ecclesiastes can be kind of a downer in some ways. But I am still really excited about teaching out of this book, Ecclesiastes. I feel like there is a word in this scripture for not only our church, but also for other believers in all around us. So I really just am asking that we open our hearts and that the Lord just speak to us through this word this morning. When I first pitched this idea to our teaching team, I knew that it was going to push some buttons, particularly because we're coupling this series with Lent, with the season of Lent. And, you know, Lent is typically associated with rules, right? You can't eat this on this particular day, and you have to do this and not do this, right? And we often, you know, especially when we're younger, we're told to follow these rules without really understanding why we're supposed to follow these rules. And so I think Lent can maybe have a negative connotation for a lot of people, maybe for us as well. And in addition to that, you know, Lent often means restrictions, right? Like going without certain things that, you know, we feel like make us happy. And so now we're going without those things and we feel less happy. And that's not a good thing. And let's face it, as Protestants or in the Vineyard, we like to call ourselves empowered evangelicals. We do not like rules. Can we be honest about that? We live under grace after all, right? Not the law. We're under grace. And it's true. It's totally true. Real, authentic grace, I believe, and a real experience with grace leads to following Jesus in freedom and joy, not out of obligation. But the book of Ecclesiastes is asking some deeper questions, not about how to be saved, how to get right with God, which I think is what we tend to associate Lent with, or at least a lot of these rules with. But it's asking about what makes the best life, the best quality of life. In some ways, Ecclesiastes is trying to answer the age-old question, what is the meaning of life? And there are a lot of people asking that question. Many who would consider themselves Christians. It's a question that people have asked for a really long time, whether you're, you know, into philosophy or even science, you know, writers, speakers, what is the real meaning of life? Well, this past week, Wednesday was Ash Wednesday. It's the beginning of Lent. And so I'd like to invite us that instead of seeing this time of Lent as just about following rules, I want us to see it as a time of reflection, a time of deeper reflection, which is why I think Ecclesiastes is such a good match for this. It is a period of time, if you're not familiar, approximately 40 days that leads up to Easter. And it's become a season of remembering that even Jesus took time to fast and pray in preparation for his entry into ministry. Jesus, God in human form, right, found purpose and meaning in fasting. If Jesus, in relating to the Father, found the practice of fasting valuable, then maybe we should too. Not out of obligation or asceticism, a word that Eugene introduced us to last week, but out of a desire to relate more intimately with God. During this time of fasting in the desert, Jesus responds to one of Satan's temptations by saying, "Man does not live on bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God." Obviously, we need food to live. Right? Obviously, we can't, you know, go, what is it? I think there's like, I think it actually is around 40 days is kind of the limit in terms of not having food or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but Jesus seems to be pointing to a deeper reality here, that we were created by God to be in relationship with him, that God spoke creation into being with his word, formed man from the dust of the earth, and he is the source of all life. So ultimately, God is what we need more than anything else. And fasting, giving up the things that we enjoy or tend to think are really important for us, it can be a helpful practice to help us remember how much more important God is than anything else in our lives. So as we take a look at the words of Ecclesiastes, I'm going to be inviting us each week to fast from something. And it's your choice whether or not you choose to go along with that. But if you do, I want us to have the understanding that it's not with the intention of following rules or under obligation, but it's with the intention of wanting to draw closer to God. This is an invitation to give up something in order to focus more on God. But let's take a look at Ecclesiastes chapter 2. So if you have your Bibles with you, you can open up your Bibles to Ecclesiastes 2. And in this section, as we're taking a look at the words of Ecclesiastes, we have this figure, the speaker, the teacher, who is searching for meaning in all sorts of things. And what I love about this is that as the teacher is going on this journey, we are invited to go on this journey as well to reevaluate the things that we think are important in our lives. We might not call these things idols per se. They could certainly be idols, right? An idol is something that we worship other than God, and we should get rid of those anyway, right? But it could be something that is just taking up too much time spent on that. And in the beginning of chapter 2, the teacher is focusing on pleasure, on finding meaning in pleasure, looking for meaning in everything pleasurable under the sun. Some things that are good and some things that are not so good. We got tripped up last week in a couple of verses because, while God gives us the things of this world for our enjoyment, they can be twisted and distorted into things that are wicked or evil. So if you take, for example, verse 7, you look at chapter 2, verse 7, it says, I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves that were born in my house. Okay? This statement is made in the context of seeking pleasure, and specifically seeking pleasure in beauty. So we can pretty much infer that the speaker is finding beauty in the male and female slaves that he is acquiring. And that implies more than just having pretty people to look at all day long. Especially when it's coupled with verse 8, which says, I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. Okay, now the word for harem here is unclear in Hebrew. But what is repeated in this section over and over again is this idea of sons or children being born. What needs to happen in order for children to be born? And it seems like a lot of that is taking place. The delights of a man's heart. Okay, I know it's not stated directly, but it does seem pretty clear that if the teacher is pursuing pleasure of all kinds, sexual pleasure is somewhere on that list. And I think what is confusing to us as readers is that the teacher continues to state that wisdom stayed with me. And so we're tempted to think that everything he is doing is good. But as I stated before when we began this series, this book is really a response to Proverbs, which is all about how to live life well, right? What to do with our words, what to do with our money, all these good lessons. But that doesn't mean the teacher is morally perfect. He may have wisdom, but he can still sin like every other human being. And if the teacher really is Solomon, right? We know it's a Solomon-like figure. Well, from 1 Kings, we know that Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. I don't even know how that's physically possible. Okay? But the writer of the book of Kings does not hold back that this was a problem, especially since God strictly forbade his people to marry foreigners, to take foreign wives, and many of these wives were from other countries. So just because he had wisdom, the teacher is not immune from making mistakes. I think is what I just want to clarify here, okay? And this pursuit of pleasure that we see at the beginning of chapter 2 is not all good. And we see all around us people living for pleasure, right? This idea of hedonism, that people are just, that's all they're trying to seek. And he's trying to point out that at the end of the day, there's nothing there to depend on, right? You're never going to be satisfied. You keep going after this pleasure and this pleasure and this pleasure. You're never going to be satisfied, good and bad. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure we were clear on that. What's even more interesting, though, is that he moves from this section on the pursuit of pleasure to the pursuit of wisdom, which I think we would all say is a really good thing. So as we turn to the second part of chapter 2, we see that wisdom itself proves empty to him in his search for meaning. Let's take a look at this. So verse 12, this is chapter 2, verse 12. Then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom, and also madness and folly or foolishness. What more can the king's successor do than what has already been done? I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise have eyes in their heads, while the fool walks in the darkness. So he's seeing there is good, there's value to wisdom, but I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Okay? So again, the teacher is looking for purpose, for the true meaning of life. And in his search for that, through wisdom, he realizes, wait a minute, what good is it to pursue wisdom if the foolish and the wise end up the same, right? I.e., dead, 6 feet under. There's a famous quote that says, death is the great equalizer of human beings. And the teacher realizes this. So now he's tripped up. It's like, hey, I thought wisdom was good, but this doesn't seem to be the meaning that I'm searching for. Let's keep reading, verse 15. Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, this too is meaningless. And remember that word means hevel, and we'll come back to it, okay? For the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. So the teacher is struggling to understand now what is most important in life, right? He wants to have some control, some kind of security in how he lives his life. Pleasure provides escape, but it doesn't satisfy. Wisdom provides the appearance of something secure, but in the end, it's still not what the teacher can depend on, because everyone dies. And the reason that the teacher gives is that wisdom is temporary. It only lasts as long as we do. And this is why that word meaningless is so important to remember. Hevel means smoke or vapor. It's temporary, it's fleeting, it dissipates when you try to grab onto it. Okay? The speaker wants something solid to hold on to. And while wisdom is a really good thing, it leads to the same end as the foolish. So then the tone starts to shift. If wisdom is hevel, if he can't even hold on to wisdom or control his life through the pursuit of wisdom, then what? Look at verse 17. So I hated life, because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. Anybody ever hate life? All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. You can't take it with you. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish? Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil, into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless, or hevel. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it. This too is meaningless, hevel, and a great misfortune. What do people get for all the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days their work is grief and pain. Even at night their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. Wow. Yep. I mean, but can anybody relate to ever feeling that way or thinking that way? Life can be tough. Work can be hard sometimes. And what's it all amount to? The teacher is searching for meaning. They're searching for the meaning of life, and they're faced with the reality that you can't take it with you. Which, we know that, and people say that all the time, but I see a whole heck of a lot of people not living that way. They're trying to take it with them the best they can. And when you die, everything you've built up gets passed down, and you have no control over what your kids or what whoever you give it to is going to do with it. It's so interesting. Carol and I have been talking about this a lot, thinking a lot about this, just in terms of, our estate plans and parents, all sorts of things, right? And we just see over and over again, parents, grandparents making decisions regarding their estates, and they sometimes deeply hurt and wound their children. And it's because they're trying, these parents, well-intentioned, right, are trying to have a lasting impact with what they've built up in their lives, right? But on some level, when they stop trusting their kids, the kids are going to be wise with their inheritance, it ends up hurting the relationship, right? And so what you're left with then, instead of having this lasting impact and making this wise decision, are broken relationships after you've gone. And that's really hard, because the reality is you can't totally control. People are trying to make decisions through estate planning that will control what happens to their estates in the future. But ultimately, there are still things that are outside of your control. Here's where I see a connection now between the pursuit of pleasure and the pursuit of wisdom. Okay? In both, the teacher is trying to have some kind of control. With pleasure, it's through escapism. I think we often use pleasure as an escape when we can't control other circumstances. We go to pleasure as a form of escape. We dive into something pleasurable. And maybe it's just for a moment, but at least I can control that moment. And this is what we see often with addiction, right? It's like we're wired to feel good. We want to feel good. And so whenever that addictive thing is, it makes us feel good for the moment, and we think we have some control in the moment, but it's fleeting. It doesn't last. It's not a lasting control. I think I see some people even using work as a form of escape, right? If I can just be successful in this area, then I'll feel good about myself. I have been there. I am definitely, workaholism is definitely part of my past, driven to work more, do more, find success through what I am able to accomplish. I think for some, it is through the amassing of wealth, right? If I can just make this much money, then I'll be satisfied. But statistically, we know it's true. You hit this plateau, and now you're like, oh, if I could just get here, I'll be satisfied. But the people on this level are thinking, if I can just be here, I'll be satisfied. And it's never ending. It's this constant, search for more and more and more. And then we have wisdom, right? We're like, gosh, isn't that the thing that we could really, if we just had wisdom, maybe we'd have some control of our life, right? Our decisions, making the best decisions in life possible. The problem is that there are things that happen in our lives that we can't control. And even the wisest of us are susceptible to those circumstances that are outside of our control. Sometimes people seek sort of deep self-introspection, right? That searching of the soul, like through reading or through cutting yourself off from the world, and don't get me wrong, like soul searching can be a really good practice, but at the end of the day, there are no guarantees. So if you're looking to build your life on that thing, if that thing is supposed to make your life meaningful, you will be disappointed. That is the point of Ecclesiastes. That is the point of the book. When difficulties come, when we face hardships, even like hardships of family faces, or kids, or grandchildren, right? All of that's beyond our control. I want to quote Tim Mackey here, author of the Bible Project, because he's just amazing. Just remember, these are Tim's words, not mine, though. He says, "You think working hard in your career makes life worth it? Think of all the stress and the toil it takes on you, the anxiety, the sleepless nights. You're probably going to be too old to enjoy the payoff by the time you earn it. And by then you have to pass it off to others who may or may not even care about your accomplishments. What about pleasure? Do you think that's what life is all about? Go for it. Live for your vacations and the weekend parties. Monday always comes." He has a good way of saying things, doesn't he? Good use of words. It's harsh, but Ecclesiastes is a reality check. What are we pushing for? What are we striving for? What are we letting dictate our peace of mind? The teacher ends this chapter with a mini realization. And I say mini realization because he doesn't totally explore this idea yet, but he will at the end of the book. Okay, so let's look at the end of the chapter when it starts at verse 24. It says, "A person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too I see is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? To the person who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind." So like I said, the idea isn't fully explored yet. In fact, we're left at the end of this chapter with the chasing after the wind statement again, which is this ongoing statement, right? Everything we pursue in life is like chasing after the wind. We can't catch it, we can't grab onto it, we can't control it. But the truth that is hinted at just before this is profound. When we receive the simple things of life, our food, our drink, even our work, as gifts from God, we can simply choose to receive. Even wisdom, knowledge, happiness, they are gifts given to us from God. And so when we adopt this posture of receiving and not striving, that is where we find peace. And that is where we find true meaning. It's only in acknowledging that we have no control, that the end result is not up to us. It's only in recognizing that truth that we can simply enjoy the gifts that God is giving us and live the way that he wants us, with freedom, with peace. It doesn't mean we don't care, but it does mean that we don't try to control. That's huge. How many of us know people, maybe including ourselves, trying to control things that are beyond our control? So as we wrap up this morning, I want us to just reflect for a minute and then apply. Okay, I told you each week we'd have the opportunity to fast from something. I'm not going to tell you what to fast from. That's between you and the Lord. But if we think through some possibilities, maybe one is going to stand out to you where you're like, okay, yep, I see that. That would be a good thing for me to fast from. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is, what am I trying to control in my life right now? What are you trying to control right now in your life? Could have a whole list of things, maybe there's one thing in particular, okay? I used to stress so much about my teaching. I'm just gonna share vulnerably, with you one example. Whether it was here at church or whether it was at school, I used to spend so much time trying to write the perfect sermon, teach the perfect lesson, and then I realized I can't control what people learn. You know what I mean? Like, it's so much I want to, but I can't. I can provide them opportunities for learning, but what people actually learn and take away from whatever I'm offering is ultimately up to them. So, for me, at that time, the choice was then to fast from this sense of drivenness or performance or whatever you would kind of call that. So if you find yourself driven in your work, whatever your work is, feeling like you're just trying to hit a particular bar or accomplish something, right? Maybe you need to step back a little bit. Maybe you've been spending too much time at work, and the invitation would be to leave work a little earlier to spend some time with God and nature, right? Or go for a walk, or just simply trust Him to provide in the area of your work. For me, it looked like setting a boundary that Saturday would be my Sabbath, and I wasn't going to work on Saturday. I wasn't going to try to teach, do any lesson planning on Saturday. I wasn't going to try to do any sermon prep on Saturday, which for me as a full-time teacher, that's a big ask to kind of say, I'm going to give you this day, Lord. But it was huge for me to release and to trust that God was going to do what He was going to do. If you are trying to deal with something difficult in your life right now, right? And you're finding yourself escaping from those negative feelings by doing something more pleasurable, could be a good thing, right? Could be food, watching TV, whatever. The invitation for you this week would be to fast from that form of escapism and instead bring that dissatisfaction to God. So that time you would spend playing that video game, right? Or binging that TV show. Lay that down and just rest in God's presence. It's much harder to do. It's easier said than done, but it's a really great practice. And the Lord will meet you in that place, I guarantee you, okay? So if you're wondering if that's you, the litmus test would be to just check in with yourself before you do that activity, right? Are you anxious about anything? Are you feeling, negative feelings about this, that, or the other? Are you avoiding feeling some kind of negative feeling? If you are, then that's escapism. But if not, it's not escapism. You're just, enjoying the things that God's given you. So just kind of use that as a litmus test, right? And if you recognize you've been avoiding dealing with something, then address it. Bring that feeling to God instead of trying to escape it, okay? And He will bring peace to you as you surrender those things to Him. Maybe something's keeping you up at night, right? The invitation to you this week would be to fast from worry. I know that sounds funny. We're not supposed to worry anyway. But think of it this way. Choose to offer your worry as a form of worship to the Lord. So every time you're worried about that thing, you bring it to the Lord. You say, okay, Lord, I'm going to bring you my worry today. I'm just going to release it to you in prayer. Okay? And again, it's not about not caring, but it's about trusting the Lord to be in control. So just make that your practice. You can consider that a form of fasting. You can fast from bad things too. That's even better, right? Fasting from bad things is even better than fasting from good things. Okay? I just want to share, I am finding so much more joy and peace as I learn to trust God in all these areas. And I don't want to say it gets easier with age, because maybe not, I don't know. But I do know that the Lord wants us to experience the good gifts that He has and to kind of live life in this posture of receiving from Him. And I think in order to do that, we have to begin to let go of some of the things that we're trying to hold on to, trying to make happen. Amen? Amen. Let's go ahead.